Hey, viewers, welcome to the Black Agenda Podcast. I'm your co-host, Adrian Devin, along with co-host Devin Dito. Today is March 20th, 2021, and we're in weekly Roundup number 9. I feel like we just started this, but hey, we're at number 9, and we got a lot of news as always, Devin. Viewers, we had to make sure within our first segment to hit some highlights, and one of the big highlights of the week is definitely what happened in Atlanta. We've been hearing a lot of talk about that. We at the Black Agenda Podcast, we always tell people, yes, our name is, Black Agenda, which makes it sound like we're talking about just Black issues, but we like to talk about how minority issues as a whole affect society. So even with Asian Americans, we got to make sure to give them some attention here. So just to kind of give you some background, if in case you haven't, been following everything, hopefully you have, but 8 people, including 6 women of Asian descent, died in shootings Tuesday at 3 spas in the Atlanta area. 1 man was injured. Authorities have already, taken the 21-year-old white man who was a gunman into custody. He told investigators that race had no factor in it, but, it's kind of hard to look at this and not look at it as some sort of racist action. Right now, he's being charged with 8 counts of murder and 1 count of assault. Fortunately, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, which remember, she's the first Asian American vice president. So, this really gives her an opportunity to speak to the people at this moment. They were doing their rally to kind of go for the COVID package, but switch gears and they had to kind of do something to address this. And they met with some Georgia legislatures, as well as Asian American and Pacific Islander advocates to listen to their perspective, as well as condemn these acts of violence and racism towards Asian Americans. So, Devin, it's a lot going on here to where, we're seeing kind of the aftermath of what Donald Trump did for Asian Americans. We know this violence and this sort of rhetoric comes after this pandemic-related discrimination. Because remember, we had a president of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, go around saying China virus, Kung Fu flu, and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people ate into that, bought into that. They like that sort of rhetoric. So it just goes to show you, Devin, that, words of the president do matter. I mean, we look at January 6th, words do matter. And this continues to be evidence that words do matter. The other thing, Devin, that's so interesting out of this is this spokesperson for the Cherokee County Sheriff's Department, Captain Baker, who said the shooter was just having, a bad day. Which, you kill 8 people and someone says, well, he just had a bad day. That's just that's a stretch to me. It just, leads me to, question, because this guy is white, or is this, spokesperson's head. Fortunately, he was removed. But Devin, I mean, it's a lot to unpack in this story. It's a lot that's still enveloping, and it's going to be a lot of damage on the Asian American community for sure.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, it's a really tragic story that we have become so used to, mass shootings. And here we are again, trying to humanize a monster, who decides to go kill 8 people. Oh, well, he was just having a bad day. It's amazing how we can do that immediately after somebody does something as horrific as that. He jumps to the conclusion, we have to humanize him and make it seem like, there had to be some other reason other than the fact that he wanted to, he chose these locations based off their race. Now, obviously, they're still early, but I think it's fair to maybe assume that race may have played a factor, in the fact that he chose spas that are predominantly staffed by Asian Americans, and he decided to shoot and kill mainly women. Now, those were his targets. So you have really two identities, women and Asian Americans, intersecting there in this tragedy. But it's again, we've become used to these types of tragedies, and we already have Congress held I think they held what they call a historic hearing on Thursday on anti-Asian violence and discrimination. That was the first time they had done that in more than 30 years. And one Republican didn't seem to be on board what was happening, which was Chip Roy of Texas. He asked whether the committee's attempt to prevent hate crimes and hate incidents against Asian Americans would hamper free speech, and he said it seems to want to venture into policing of rhetoric in a free society. Though he said he opposes hate crimes, he's worried about infringing on people's rights to for their freedom of speech. And one good thing that did come out of this is that there was a GoFundMe page that was set up for two sons of Atlanta spy shooting victim Hyun Jung Grant. That's raised more than $2 million as of Saturday morning. So you do see the outpouring of support, which is important. But back to your point, of course, of how did we get here? You have a president who was, stigmatizing Asian Americans because a pandemic, originated from China. And so words matter. You cannot just go around saying Kung flu and China virus and not have people act on that. And so it's just, we have to be honest in the conversation. It's a lot of things in this. It's the China virus, it's stigmatizing Asian Americans, but also, humanizing mass shooters who tend to be white males. We have to be very careful in trying to make them seem like this is normal. Nobody just has a bad day and decides to kill 8 people. I'm sorry. There's something fundamentally wrong there.
Exactly. That's if we just play it off and having a bad day, it's reminiscent of what Dr. Turner told us in our first episode when we talked about if you said, racism is just someone who has a mental illness, you're just trying to find an excuse rather than just addressing the actual issue of it. And that's just that, this guy had an issue with, with Asian Americans and with women. Because if you think about, say somebody who did want to go and do this thing and they wanted to pick spies. I mean, there's a bunch of spies that are run by Black people, white people, Native Americans, you name it. There's a bunch of different ones, but he decided to target a particular minority group. He didn't just go, just happenstance to any sort of spy. It's like he was just driving down the highway and he just went, to any sort of spy that he saw. He chose, spas that were run and operated by, Asian Americans. So it's such a stretch when people say that this isn't, some sort of racist allegation. I don't know. I hope investigators aren't listening to them. I know it's not fair to prejudge, without all the evidence. But in this sort of case, I mean, it seems very cut and dry when someone, murdering someone, shooting someone in the head so close is what they were talking about. That's not just having a bad day, Devin. That's a lot more than that. And I'm hopeful, Devin, that there's going to be something that comes out of this. I think back to our community, the Black community, and thinking about, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all the lives that had to be lost to get us to the George Floyd, Policing Act. Maybe this is going to be a moment to where Congress just wakes up. Fortunately, they don't have to rely on Republicans because Republicans aren't really behind this. But hopefully there's going to be enough push, within Democrats. Hopefully Joe Manchin's not going to be a stickler or something like that and really get something done. Yeah, I know. And really get something done for Asian Americans, because I always tell people, who always, say, why are you talking about minority rights? It's because it matters. I mean, we are we're the minority for a reason. If you look at the definition of minority, it's not usually the best thing there, and that's why we've got to have support. No matter what community, whether it's women, Asian Americans, Black Americans, it doesn't matter. So Devin, I hope that historic hearing, there was a lot of emotions from lawmakers. I'm hoping that sways some Republicans. Obviously, from Chip's comment in Texas, that didn't really do much for him. But as I always tell our viewers and listeners, it seems like Texas and California are just different breeds of politicians, Devin. So I don't know. We can't get our politicians to be on the right page, but that's viewers. We just wanted to make sure to highlight that. Definitely wanted to make sure to send condolences to the families, thoughts and prayers to the survivor in the ICU. Just want to make sure to recognize that, because on top of going through a global pandemic and economic crisis, we still have to be mindful that racism is still a crisis that we face every day in America. And until we have some sort of legislation and a societal awakening, we'll never kind of get out of that. But enough about that topic, Devin. Our second topic isn't any better. I mean, it's still kind of in this realm. Of maybe we need to look back at our gun control episodes from season 1. But whenever we talk about this one is out of Houston, Texas, where there was a 1-year-old who was shot accidentally by a police officer. And Devin, when you get into this story, it's an interesting one for sure. It's very sad, obviously, because this 1-year-old is fighting for his life in ICU, and that's a tough situation to be one and going through that. But the incident and how it broke down, his mom was in the car with him, and the baby was in the in his seat, and then there was an armed robber that came to the car and was trying to hijack the car, and then cops showed up, and since the guy was armed, cops fired shots. One shot happened to kill Woods, who's a suspect, the gunman or armed robber, and then the shot that also hit the child. So, I mean, it's one of those things to where it's just like, the cop probably should have done something way different, obviously. But at the same time, when you look at it, he could have said, well, maybe I thought that the gunman was going to shoot her if she didn't get out of the car. It's such a heavy situation to where if I was a police officer in that situation, I don't know how I would have acted. I would have thought that maybe I would have tried something differently. But if I see someone with a gun pointing it at a mom and her baby, saying telling them to get out of the car, I would probably think if something doesn't happen, he's probably going to shoot them.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a tricky situation, and it's never as black and white as we would like it to be. It's easy to say yes, they were doing the right thing, they were chasing him down, and they should have attempted to subdue him at all costs. But I guess you have to weigh the costs against the harm that can be done against the public at the hands of the police. Now, yes, if they had let him go, he could have went on to do other things, but also we also understand that the police can make mistakes, deadly, almost deadly mistakes like this. Like, she obviously made it clear that her child was in there, and it's a tragic situation. Again, thoughts and prayers for her, and her child. But we hear these stories sometimes, and I just think, I get the police have a very difficult job. I don't know what I would have done in that situation. But I just think if you hear somebody yelling at you that their child is in the car with the person you're chasing, how do you go through the process and say, all right, it's okay, I'm going to still shoot in this vehicle? It's worth it that much to stop this man from doing whatever you were chasing him and whatever he was doing, to stop him at that point and risk the life of that child. I just don't know if it's really worth risking that child's life to stop this man from doing. You could have gotten him later on, possibly. You could have found, I feel like there was just another way maybe to do this. And I know he was armed and hostile, but I just feel like we could have, this is one of those situations, maybe we could have said, okay, hold on, let's let him stay in the car, or just try to get him later on or something. Because if you shoot in there and you kill that child, there's no way to get that back. You might be able to catch the perpetrator later on, but if you shoot and you kill that child, there's no coming back from that. So she's gonna sue she's gonna go through the process. They're gonna have a lawsuit. She's already got civil rights attorney Ben Crump representing her. And shout out to Ben Crump. He's been all over it as far as these cases. But it's just another tragic situation. And then we have the question of what does what does justice look like? I don't know. Like, you could fire the officer and give her, a humongous settlement, but at the end of the day, her child is going to have to live with the injuries that he has for the rest of his life, and she's going to have to live with that traumatic experience. I don't know if you really can get justice in this.
I don't know either, Devin. And honestly, me personally, I mean, I'm not a lawyer or a judge or anything, but I feel like the justice that's going to be served out of this case is that this officer is probably going to get administrative leave, and he's probably going to maybe return back to work, or if he doesn't return, it's just going to be because it just doesn't look good, with the optics. But I don't think he's going to get any sort of punishment, for his actions. But I completely agree. I think that when it comes down to, community policing, we kind of figure out better ways to do that. I get, in both perspectives, to where you see somebody armed, your thought is shoot, because they may shoot, the people in the car who are, just innocent. But maybe there was a way to convince the mom to say, hey, give him the car, just get out of the car and, just let him, get it, and then we'll chase him afterwards, like you were kind of saying. Maybe there's some different things, because, when you do shoot into the car, you got situations where, there was a bullet in his head. I mean, they had to remove that, from the skull. And he's had, 10 seizures so far. And, like I said, he's only 1 year old, and he's already, having to go through such events to where, we don't know, what his survival, what his recovery is going to be like. So, just giving them money, it's just like how we were talking about George Floyd's family being given $27 million. Is George Floyd back because of that $27 million? Do they get those moments and memories that they will get to make more of those? No, they don't get any of that. They just get money, which is great for generations to come. But it's, when you talk about, is this justice? It's really, really hard to say whenever a life has been taken or a life is, put on the line, because again, he's got some serious injuries that, at age 1, couldn't imagine going through that. So, again, like Devin said, thoughts and prayers, to the ICU victim, from, the Asian, or rather from the Atlanta shooting, as well as to 1-year-old Legend Smalls here. Definitely want to, be thinking about them. Before the break, on a bit more positive note, vaccines are available. More and more availability in states. Go to the your website and check COVID vaccine availability. Just type it into Google. They started off, of course, everybody knew what the healthcare workers and essential workers, but now a lot of people, from teachers to different professions, as well as people who have certain conditions, like if you're obese or HIV or high blood pressure, different things like that, you can start getting the vaccine. And we're making sure to say that because, we're going to encourage you, get a vaccine. It's not a politics thing. It's not a Donald Trump vaccine or anything like that. It's a vaccine that was, a lot of money was put behind, a lot of medical research was put behind. So we encourage everybody, please go get it, because we'll never get out of this pandemic if we don't. So go get your vaccine. During the break, try to look on the website and schedule one. But stick with us. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
welcome back. So we talked in the first break about a couple of stories, really tragic stories. So we kind of want to lighten it up a little bit and talk about the economy and also the free market. And so a lot of discussions are going on this week about economic dislocation, due to the pandemic, and it's really laid bare the struggles of small businesses who've been unable to really compete with corporate giants that have done extremely well during this pandemic. And so now Congress is trying to get involved, where now you have experts and lawmakers who are throwing out, these stunning stats. So, I mean, just to encapsulate, here's a few. The four biggest airlines currently control about 65% of U.S. passenger traffic. Four airlines have 65% of the passenger traffic. Then you go to healthcare. We have five giant healthcare insurers who control an estimated 45% of them. I mean, that's almost half the market. 45% of the healthcare insurance market is controlled by five companies. If you go to pharmaceuticals, you see pharmaceuticals are really dominated by three major companies. You also see the banking, our financial industry. You have the top four banks control about 44% of the market. I mean, it even goes into book publishing, where you have
which is terrible.
Which is right. Five book publishers control 80% of the U.S. book market. And then Google. We all know Google is a massive company, but Google alone accounts for 90% of web searches worldwide. And then it even goes to your food. So your meat packing companies, there are four meat packing companies that control 80% of that market. And then lastly, it goes to your beer. So the top four brewers and importers control about 76% of the U.S. beer market. And so now that we have a Democratic majority in Congress and President Joe Biden, who seems somewhat prepared to act on anti-monopoly agenda, the focus is now widening to the rest of corporate America. And, of course, there are critics that say the corporate concentration is quickening and it's limiting consumers' choices. So this week we saw Senator Amy Klobuchar, who put forward an expansive legislation to overhaul antitrust law, and it would make it harder, for dominant companies to win regulators' approval of mergers and stretch the government's authority. So no company breakups are expected, but I don't know, Adrian, the legislative success could make it harder for companies to make new acquisitions and shift the burden to them to prove that this merger is, at the end of the day, they're worried about, is this good for consumers? And I know we talked about Google, but Facebook and Amazon are on the map as well as being targets of monopoly legislation. But that's a very powerful lobby you're going up against if you're going to try to pass this through Congress. And you're talking about some of the largest companies in the country who have very, very deep pockets. So, I don't know. You got the FCC is getting involved, so I don't know, AJ. We might see some movement, but I don't know.
I don't know either, Devin, but it definitely matters because, going back to what you mentioned about the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, they're looking at, big pharma, the pharmaceutical companies, and everybody who takes prescription drugs know that the cost of prescriptions are on the rise. You can never get a name brand prescription. You always got to go generic route. And even when you go generic, sometimes it may be expensive. So yeah, that's why this matters, viewers. That's why we, Devin and I, when we put together the script, you may, wonder why we pull these stories together. But this is why it matters, to have this kind of stuff. Yeah, you're going to have Republicans who are going to say that, if we, step into the free market or whatever, we're stifling competition. We're not letting the economy be vibrant and letting it thrive and be, capitalistic. But Devin, going back to your statistics, that's not a free market. Whenever you've got, a handful of businesses who are able to dominate a particular industry, it may not be one, company doing it, which is a monopoly, but it's like an oligarchy. It's, they're able to control it. I mean, I can't be someone who's, going to say, hey, I'd like to start, a book publishing company, and I want it to be a real big thing here in America. The big five here, they're going to probably tell me no. I can probably sell some books in Mississippi or whatever, but if I'm trying to get, on the big stage like Penguin House or whatever it's called, that's probably one of them. You can't get on that level. So that's why this really matters, viewers, because if you're somebody who you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to go into one of these fields where there's only so many, companies that have monopolized the industry, you can't do it. I mean, they can literally put up barriers of entry so that you can't get into it. And the reason how they do that is because of, like Devin was saying, the money. I mean, there's a lot of money that they give to politicians. These corporations, lobby. So that's why it's really hard for, people to get in certain industries. It's just like the weed industry that's, become medically legal and even recreationally legal. I mean, you got to have $1 million+ to even get a license to start up. I mean, if you're somebody who right now, where it's just become medically legal in Mississippi, and you're thinking you'd like to, get some generational wealth, go ahead and get it from the ground up, you can't do that because there's certain businesses who have made it that way because they've lobbied the leaders to do certain things so that they're the only players in the game. So it really matters, viewers, that, that we kind of talk about this and we bring it down to terms that everybody can just talk while eating dinner about or whatever. It's it sounds fancy when you say antitrust law and monopolies and everything like that. But at the end of the day, it goes down to, consumers. We as, people, we want to have choices. We want to have, good customer service, and we want to have fair pricing. That's why we've got to, in my opinion, have a little bit of government reaching into the economy, reaching into capitalism, because my opinion is capitalism does not work the way it is right now. If it did, you would have, businesses like Amazon popping up, every year or so. But you don't see that because there are certain companies who say, I'm going to be in this sector and no one else is going to be able to thrive in it. So I'm very hopeful, Devin, that there will be enough push, from lawmakers, since we've got Democrats, running, the federal government for the most part, other than Joe Manchin, who's, big stickler. I'm hopeful that they're going to be able to get some movement, get something going here, because clearly it's an issue. You even have Republicans, Devin, who had an issue with Democrats by saying that they're using these antitrust laws to promote to not promote competition, but rather advance social and social and environmental goals. And my question is, what's bad about advancing social and environmental goals? Tell me, is there something bad about that, Devin? Maybe I didn't read the latest tweet about it or something.
That's a tired old argument that they need to retire. That's code word for socialism, basically. When you try to advance social or environmental goals, and socialism is what they're trying to say. That's what they're trying to get across. And listen, I mean, you may not believe that corporate consolidation is a bad thing. I mean, it's not in all instances, but when you have companies like a Facebook, for instance, who has gobbled up an Instagram and a WhatsApp, and they keep buying competitors. Instagram was a competitor to Facebook, and the only reason they purchased them was so that they could not have that competition. That's the thing we're trying to avoid. When you have a company like Facebook, who is now incredibly powerful because they have so much data on all of us, because they've gobbled up, these individual companies and are just collecting it wholesale like that. That's what we're trying to avoid. You see it in the telecoms industry. Sprint and T-Mobile have now merged, so we only have AT&T, Verizon, and now T-Mobile as far as your big three telecommunications companies. 20 years ago, it wasn't like that, but it has all consolidated, and you can't say that it is now cheaper to have a cell phone today than it was, 20 years ago. And that's what we're trying to avoid, is that they keep telling us that, when AT&T buys up DirecTV and Warner Brothers and all these different entities, that it's going to somehow be better for the consumer in the long run. That's not true. AT&T has gobbled up companies. They're gigantic, and their service is terrible. Their service is awful.
Slow.
It's very slow. They have not really invested in broadband. They haven't really put money towards their mobile stuff, and it's just they're trying to spin it. And then too, the flip side to it is that they will use government regulation to rig the game so that they don't have competition. Like you were just saying, it takes $1.5 million to start a weed business. That's not by accident. The players who get in there get to decide the rules, and they have rigged it. So you can't just go and start a phone company tomorrow. That it doesn't work like that. You can't just go start a pharmaceutical company. There are rules that they have set up to keep people out that also stifles competition. So it matters. Yes, it's not a shiny, sexy object when you talk about antitrust law, but everything that you do is controlled by somebody. And
Yeah.
you think of Facebook, they're tracking you through the app. They want to give you Messenger. They want to see what you're doing. They want, like, they're doing, but they're getting into a lot of different areas where there is a worry there that one company will end up, with too much power at a certain point. I think we're getting very close with Amazon, who is really all over the place as far as media. They're in retail. They're just really taking over the world, honestly. And they really, I believe Amazon eventually should be broken up into individual companies, but we're a long way away from that. And a lot of money, is going to be spent to thwart these types of, arguments. But nonetheless, we just wanted to make sure we point this out, put it on your radar, as far as monopolies go. And we do want to shift a little bit from corporate consolidation over to what's going on down at the southern border. And so this has been a huge story here this week, but we know immigration has been a big thing. And this week, the White House press secretary kind of slipped up a little bit and said that the border migrant surge was a crisis. And so when she was asked about it, she tried to correct it to saying challenges. And so when you consider the reporting in the AP about emergency sites raising safety concerns, there's a camp in West Texas where 10% of the camp's population has COVID-19. These are some serious issues going on. And Joe Biden, President Biden, is already facing pressure from Republicans over how to handle this surge of migrants. Critics say this surge was driven by the fact that he was taking a softer stance, on immigration than Donald Trump. I mean, I think most people would be taking a softer stance after what he said over the last 4 years, but on January 20th, Biden scrapped several of Trump's immigration policies, including the construction of the new border wall. And so, Adrian, we're already seeing Republican Congressman Chuck Fleischman. He said that Biden's administration has created an environment that caused an increase in migration. So in February, this is how serious this has really gotten. In February, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency arrested about 100,000 people at the southern border, including about 9,500 unaccompanied children, which is a 28% jump over January. And Biden and Democrats are already trying to propose legislation to create a citizenship pathway for the already 11 million people who currently live here undocumented and illegally. So, Adrian, this is going to be an early test, of the Biden presidency. It's one of the things that people had a clear choice in when you voted in the last election was, did you want to go with the immigration policies of Donald Trump? And did you want to go with the immigration policies of Joe Biden? And I think we are seeing a byproduct of when you do go out with a very soft stance on immigration, you're probably going to see an influx in people saying, well, the bad guy Trump is gone. Now it's the time to cross the border and come over illegally, and they're not going to, arrest him and send him back. So I get Joe trying to be nice and have a big heart, but we absolutely need to figure this out, or this is going to turn into a disaster, really.
Yeah, Devin, it's so interesting whenever we talk about immigration. My mind always goes back to the fact that we as Americans, most of us, we're just born here and just got lucky.
Yeah.
We could have been born anywhere else in the world. And I think about the other thing is that we as Americans, we boast how it's the greatest country on the planet. So with those 2 points being said, I think we have to understand that people are going to want to be here. People know the success of America. They know the opportunity here. They know the freedoms here. So with that being said, though, we still have to make sure we have legal systems to get people, to become citizens.
Mm-hmm.
I get where President Biden is going with his plan. I think there's got some really, really great points in the plan. I don't know how it's going to win over Republicans, because one thing, Devin, doesn't have any support for border security.
Yeah.
Does have some funding for new technologies at the southern border, but Republicans are really about building the wall, and Joe Biden's bill doesn't really have any funding for that. There are some things, though, Devin, that, like I said, that I really, really like about the bill. And the reason why I like it is because if you're going to be a Republican or someone who says, well, we shouldn't have so many people migrating to our country, well, you got to ask the question, why are people migrating to America? And within this bill, there's several different things that really try to address why people are doing this. One of the things they're going to be doing is putting money into boosting economic development and tackling corruption in Latin American countries. And that's one of the reasons why people flee, their homeland, because they don't have any opportunity. There's crime, there's a cartel, there's drugs, there's a lot of different factors to where you can't wake up and tell your kids that we're going to be able to make it through the next day or whatever. It's not that sort of security. So I love the fact that we're putting money towards that. Setting up a refugee processing program in Central America to prevent some of the immigrant caravans that have overwhelmed the border security in recent years. That should be a good selling point for Republicans. I know you got to put that on a flyer or something, because everyone was talking so heavily about the caravan. So this bill is trying to prevent some of that. Expanding transnational anti-drug task forces in Central America. Donald Trump talked so much about how they're sending over so many drugs. Well, this bill is seeking to try to stop that from even taking place. Some of the things that may not be as popular within the bill is like, immediately providing green cards to farm workers, temporary protected status, and people who lived in the United States illegally as children. Republicans probably don't like that. A lot of people don't like just blanket amnesty, which, just giving people citizenship. I think this one here, Devin, about the fact that for people who were living in the United States before January 1st of this year, there's going to be a 5-year pathway to give them legal status, to where they've got to pass background checks, pay taxes, and even fulfill other basic requirements. And then after 3 years, they can pursue citizenship. So, Devin, I think that, Republicans are going to be able to pick apart certain elements of this legislation, say, it's bad, given the blanket amnesty. But I feel like this bill really does a lot to address some of the issues that, Latin American, Central American countries are facing, so that if you are, an opponent of immigration, you should be in favor of that.
You should. Although I do think, at least in this case, the Republicans do have a point to make, which is that we can't just ignore the border, like as if there aren't just thousands of people arriving here. Look, I understand they're coming for different reasons, but we have to make the legal process worth going through. If people know they can just come across the border and get here and be given a path to citizenship, then why come the legal way? Like, why not just come illegally and just get, and try to,
get free citizenship?
Yeah, like why even try the legal route? And that's my issue has been the whole time, is that I get it. We don't need to say the things that Donald Trump said about the folks coming across the border, but you can have rules in place, particularly, if they do come across the border, they need to be, in my opinion, they need to be deported back to the country they came from and go through the regular process. That's not, we're not being mean. It's just we have a process set up for a reason. Nobody else in the world can do what these folks that are coming out of South America can do. Everybody else has to go through the regular process. But they get to come across the border, get here, and then all of a sudden we give them a path to citizenship. So why even try to go through the regular process? And then I love the idea of setting up a refugee processing in Central America. That should have been done a long time ago, because we knew that the situation down there was already kind of deteriorating economically, and then you add on the cartels and other things that are going on, yeah, they're going to be trying to get, to America because there are jobs here. And that's the other problem I think is missing, is that we aren't penalizing companies who are here in America who knowingly hire illegal people who don't have papers. There's no, I don't know what is the repercussion if you hire up hundreds of migrants who are legal, put them to work, pay them under the table, pay them, very low wages, no benefits, and then you get busted by ICE. They take all those people away and they send them back to their country, but the company's still there. The business and factory is still there. So what's the incentive to go and hire people who have, regular papers? I think that's a big part of the issue here. I don't have an issue with spending money down in South America, but we have to address the problem here, which is that they're coming for jobs and they know they're here. So we have to get at that problem also.
No, you're right, and I feel like the point of making sure that we have legal pathways so that people do it the right way, and you honor people who are going through that process. Because we had a fraternity brother that was going through the process of that, and she would explain how lengthy of a process it was. So I get that. The other thing I would say to round it off, I guess, is that there's so many people who are here illegally already. We've got to, it's almost like two separate issues, and it's like we're trying to address them with one sort of bill. It's like, you've got to address the people who are here. You've got to address the border crisis. You've got to address, the things that are getting people to migrate to America. All three of those things have to be addressed. And I feel like, this bill is doing some of that, except the fact that Donald Trump, made the whole deal about talking about the border such a negative thing for Democrats that it's like anytime you talk about it with them, they don't want to put any money towards it. But I agree, Devin. We have to be a nation with borders. We have to make sure that people come through legally. But we also have to address all the other issues, and hopefully we'll be able to do that.
And
go ahead.
Just the last thing I'll say is, like, there is a middle ground between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I think people are like forgetting, like, you don't have to be too soft or too hard. I think there's a middle ground that people are just kind of skipping over. Like you say, maybe they're just worried about looking like they're too hard on immigrants. The Democrats are, and the Republicans don't want to look like they're being too soft on immigrants. But there is a middle ground here. We don't have to, demonize them and call them criminals, but we also don't have to treat them with kid gloves and say, well, okay, you're here, so we're going to put you up in hotels and convention centers instead of just deporting them back to the country and making them go through the process. Like, we can do this. We can figure this out in a way that works, that doesn't go to each extreme. But I think just the politics today, it's just not going to allow us to do that. So I just want to make that last point.
No, that's a good point. It's like I said, these sorts of topics are going to be more and more interesting in upcoming months, because this is not going to be something to go away, and we'll probably be talking about it more and more. One of the things that we wanted to make sure to talk about just before our break here, student loans. We've got a little bit of news about that, where thousands of students who were defrauded by for-profit schools, they're going to be having their loans, their federal loans, that is, fully erased. The Biden administration announced that on this Thursday, which is a reversal of the Trump administration, which only did a partial relief for those borrowers. This decision does apply to students who have already, filed their claims and been approved and got that partial. It's going to affect, about 72,000 borrowers, which adds up to about $1 billion with the B in loans. So that's a lot of money for these for-profit schools that, who defrauded the students. So good news for those borrowers. Hopefully this broadens and the more sweeping, push to kind of alleviate some of the burden we're having in student loans for all borrowers, Devin. Hopefully you and I can start to see some of that too, because I didn't get defrauded by a for-profit school, but I still have some student loan debt, and I'm sure our viewers do too. So viewers, with that, we're going to wrap up this segment. We're going to give you another break. Stick with us, and we'll come back with that third news segment. So enjoy your break.
Yesterday, we were on our way, but November came. Man, I wish it was yesterday. Yesterday, we were on our way, but November came. Man, I wish it was yesterday.
All right, viewers, welcome back. We're getting into our third segment here. We wanted to talk about a story within our community where we're seeing a rise in homelessness. And to me, I saw this story, and since I've moved to Los Angeles, homelessness has become more near and dear to me because every day I see, I don't know how many people who are homeless, but this is something that we're seeing throughout the Black community. When you're already talking about a community that's going through a pandemic with racism, with the COVID-19 virus, and now homelessness. The challenges that we're looking at here is just the fact that a lot of African Americans had jobs to where there weren't salary positions, they couldn't work from home and different things like that. So when you have a pandemic, people lost their jobs. And, within this $1.9 trillion COVID bill, there is, some assistance, for rent, but that's going to expire at the end of the month. And, time is of the essence, Devin. People who are landlords, they want their money. You can, tell them, stories about how you're late or how you're expecting money. But at the end of the day, they're going to want money, or they're going to send you a letter in the mail saying you got 15 days or we're going to evict you or whatever. And there's some really bad statistics here where you've got almost 10 million Americans who are behind on their rent payments, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. When you look at a census data that was looked at in February 3rd, 15, you can look at about 30% of Black families reported not being caught up on rent or mortgage payments versus 17% of all other families. So again, you're seeing a divide, Blacks, 30%, other families, 17%. It's reminiscent of different conversations we always have, Devin, to where when things are bad for others, it's really, really bad for our people. Because, you almost got double, the difference here. You got 40% of Black families said that they are unsure if they're going to be able to make their next rent payment on time, versus 24% of all other families. In addition to that, 50% of Black families reported that they were somewhat or very likely to face eviction or foreclosure in the next 2 months, versus 36% of other families. So again, Devin, just kind of shows the fact that when you look at the American history of systemic racism, institutional racism, and things like that, whether it be in jobs, whether it be in housing, whether it be food security, income inequality, this pandemic just exacerbated all of those issues and just made everything come to the table. So it shouldn't be any surprise to anybody, Devin, that you've got our people getting hit hardest now and having to be faced with homelessness. Shouldn't be a surprise at all.
No, it's not. It's a sad reality of where we are in America as far as inequality goes. Those on the bottom tend to take the brunt of every crisis, whether that's financial or a pandemic. We saw it in 2008. 40% of Black wealth is wiped out, in a matter of months, and that has not come back yet. And then you get COVID-19, and you see the same thing happening, whether that's just the fact that a lot of African Americans died, or the fact that now it has put many, many more of us now on the verge of being homeless, because they're not having jobs or their income has been cut, because they tend to be blue collar workers who have to go into work and deal with people face to face. And those were the things that were shut down during the pandemic. And so that's why we needed the support, the $1,200 and $600 and $1,400 checks were absolutely necessary just to get people through. But what are we going to do after the pandemic is over? People were struggling before the pandemic, and it just made it worse. And so it is, now we do need policies that focus on trying to fix some of the underlying issues. And I think one thing that's happening is that this new child tax credit is going to be like refundable, but also it's going to be paid out and on a monthly basis. So now you're talking about families will be getting money for children on a monthly basis instead of getting it one time lump sum at the end of the year, after they do their taxes. That will probably really help a lot of families out there, because they'll be getting that money every single month instead of getting it at the end of the year in a lump sum. So that could help with some of this. I know they think it'll help child poverty as well. So that's something we need, but we do need more, things that will help to build, generational wealth, but also things like raising the minimum wage would have helped, with giving people more money to take home, particularly making it a living wage. That way, whatever state they're in, it's set based on what it takes to live in that particular area. We should have passed a higher minimum wage by now. $7.50 is not going to work, or $7.25 is not going to work. And a lot of people who are African American, who work in these blue collar jobs, are not making much more than that. And so I think, yes, we need more policies, and the government, to me, has a responsibility to fix it. Because, to be honest, the government is a big reason why the inequality even exists in the first place. So to me, this is part of a larger issue, like you say, whether it's healthcare, or just jobs or school or educate. There seems to, every time we look at the statistics, African Americans tend to be faring worse than others. I don't think that's an accident, and we need policies from the top that are going to go at those issues in a real way and try to fix some of that. And hopefully with the child tax credit, that'll help, but we definitely need more coming on.
I hope that it'll help, Devin. And honestly, if people will go back to the reporting we did last week, we can prove that it'll help, because we saw that study out of California where they gave people, money every month, and it not only improved their finances, it improved their well-being, their mental health, it improved so many more dynamics than just, finances. And so it's really clear right now to me that that's what our government should be pushing whenever you're talking about all these different crises, whether it be with healthcare and rising prescriptions, or people who can't afford to put their kids in childcare, or people who can't afford to pay their rent. If you start doing some sort of universal basic income, maybe that can sort of alleviate these sorts of things that are going on. Maybe because I get the case that reparations isn't going to be a huge selling point, but maybe we need to just get the whole the Black Caucus and everyone to just switch gears and just go to UBI, just to make sure everybody just gets something. If they don't want to make sure our people can get reparations, how about just make sure everybody who's a citizen at a certain age know they're going to get income, know they're going to make sure that they got money to just have basic necessities, basic needs. How about every child at birth gets a couple stock options from the top Fortune 500 companies, so that way when they're 65 they don't necessarily have to worry about it. What's it to Google to give up one share, or Amazon or something like that? That there are so many different levers that our government can switch to kind of make this better, to alleviate some of this burden. But it just comes down to, are we going to say, like you always say, pick you up by your bootstraps and you got to do it yourself? Or are we going to say that we are a society where people have to work together? We're a chain. The weakest link brings down everybody. Because if you think about it, where there's no opportunity, there's more crime, there's more violence, there's more theft, there's more, homelessness, there's more, abandoned buildings. I mean, there's more of these things that people don't like in their communities. So if we start to address, again, like, Joe Biden's immigration bill, the root causes of issues, rather than just trying to blanket them and put a Band-Aid. I always tell people, we got to get away from, typical American politics. We got to stop giving people these microwave solutions and actually tell them, we're going to make a dinner. It may take a little bit, like, Michael Twitty said to us, it may take a little bit to cook a little bit, but once we get done, it's going to be worth it. You're going to be glad that we did this. So I think that that's what we need to take, into consideration, that it's tough times. We've got to start putting these plans together and telling people that, they got to hold out for the ride.
No, you're right on. I mean, you're spot on as far as what the government needs to do. And I know people are out there like, nah, the government doesn't need to do that. You're just going to create dependency, on the government. But like you say, we have studies, we have data and facts and proof. And when you give people, and not even give, when you allow folks to have a little extra money a month, whether it's $500. We saw in Stockton, California, it just did not happen. These folks still went to work. They spent most of the money on essentials, food, rent, paying bills, maybe paying down some debt. And you see it now during the pandemic with how people are spending their stimulus checks. They're not just going out there buying TVs and cell phones. They're paying down debt. They're saving it.
It's like making sure they can live.
Exactly. They're doing the things people keep telling us we need to do, which is be smart with your money, pay down debt, save it. And it's like, we've seen, so it's not like these people are just sitting at home getting this $1,400. It's like, oh man, I can sit at home for the rest of the year. It's like, no. Most people want to work. Most people who get food stamps work. Like, they don't just sit at home collecting. Like, it's become a myth almost. Like, yes, with any system, you're going to have folks who abuse it. You're going to have some fraud. But for the most part, if you look at our welfare systems, for those who get money, but the majority are going to work or doing something, to produce money and try to live a decent life. They're not just at home, just twiddling their thumbs and playing video games. We want to think that, and that's what stops us from doing these types of programs, because that always comes up. Oh, they're just going to sit at home. They're going to quit their jobs. They said that about the unemployment program, during the pandemic. That wasn't true. People got an extra $600, and guess what? They went right back to work, Were there some people who sat at home? Sure. But the majority got that money, used it, paid their bills, and when a job became available, they went and they worked. So people know, people understand what they need for their lives to take care of themselves. They're not stupid. Like, we want to believe we give them $1,400, they're just going to blow it, quit their job, and just, just become a dependent on the government. And that's just not true. It's false. It's a myth, and we need to stop using it to stand in front of things like UBI that we really need to give a serious look at. I mean, that could be a replacement for the food stamp programs and things like that. Just wrap it all into, a check that you get, that you can use for yourself, and you can decide on how it should be spent, and not have the government telling you, dictating to you how and where you can spend these types of funds. We need to really take a hard look at UBI and maybe help alleviate some of these stories that we see about homelessness that are happening in child poverty. So I don't understand, the where this came from, but I think hopefully the conversation is changing a bit. And we did want to kind of shift also to going off of homelessness, but moving towards the diversity in our corporate community, because, after what happened with George Floyd over the summer, of course, this happens every time something like this happens. There's this effort, to try to right the wrongs and really focus on diversity. And diversity efforts skyrocketed, after George Floyd was killed. And so many companies prioritize equity and inclusion initiatives for the first time. And now, after a year of progress, industry experts kind of fear the momentum could actually run out. And because of the cost and the effort of just the long-term commitment, of committing to diversity and inclusion, but also just a lack of support from top company officials, or plainly just a burnout, among chief diversity officers who don't, I guess, want to focus on diversity for over a year. So many Americans believe that, these diversity statements from companies are performative. And we kind of talked about this a little bit, with Michael Twitty, about just some of the ceremonial things that we were seeing from companies, these statements. We were like, is this really true? Is it real action? But 69% of Americans see, public pressure as a primary motive for companies' statements about race. So it's not even like the company itself is coming together and said, look, we care enough about to say this. It's more so we don't want the public perception to be that we don't care about diversity, or the public has to pressure a company to say something. More companies are saying they're serious about improving in diversity and inclusion practices. But, Adrian, we know this. We saw the polling number. You can see it in the polling numbers for Black Lives Matter. It went up during the summer, And then about August, September, October, it came right on back down to where it was before. And I think you may see the same thing here with just some corporate burnout when it comes to focusing on, diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, probably so. I mean, it's good to see, like, for instance, that chief diversity officer title, like, that saw a surge in 2020. More companies, saw about an 84% increase in hires for that sort of role. Even diversity and inclusion job positions saw a 54% increase in December 2020. So people do respond to atrocities like death and violence, police brutality. It does suck, and it's terrible that we have to always get to those moments for people to start caring about them. But Devin, it's clear to see that burnout's going to happen because if the fact that we're getting results is because someone died, well, we're going to have somebody die almost every month or two just to get companies to say, all right, let's endorse Black Lives Matter because last month so and so was killed by a knee in the neck from this officer. It's if our rationale is that companies are moving forward, they're making more commitments because of this, but now they're burning out. It's going to be terrible for us. It's great that we're getting to this point, but there's not going to be enough follow through with it. It's like you're going to have companies that are going to have diversity mission statements, but what does that really mean? What has the company done to diversify their board of directors? Make sure that I'm not saying you have to do affirmative action, but if you're going to focus on diversity, I mean you've got to make sure that there's certain metrics and parameters of how you're going to judge what have we done from point A to point B to say, well, we've actually thought about diversity. We're a more diverse company than what we were when we hired our chief diversity officer. It's going to take companies doing that. But, Devin, going back to what you were talking about, companies aren't going to put the dollars into doing that because that's not profitable. Us thinking about diversity, for most companies, it's not going to make them more money. It may make the experience for their employees better, but most businesses are thinking about what can I sell, what service am I promoting to my customers, and what's going to bring me more money so that my shareholders, vote for my board of directors every year, whatever the case may be. It's all going to come down to the dollars and cents. So I would definitely see this being a burnout. Like I said, I hope that it doesn't take somebody dying every year for this to happen. But like I said, Dev, that's what we're looking at. I mean, this is clearly a result of death. And I'm hoping that these, CEOs and these board of director chairmen, all these people who have committed to doing something, I hope it's not something that's going to just last for right now. And then when we don't have, another police shooting or another police death, that they're going to say, well, okay, well, maybe we've done enough. We've liberated you. We've given you a little bit of freedom. So maybe we've done enough in these 2 to 3 years.
Well, there are going to be a lot of people who feel like that. They feel like they put out a statement. They supported Black Lives Matter. They might have donated a little bit, and they feel like that's enough. I think it's funny that people can get burned out on diversity as if it's such a tough issue. Like, the only thing we're asking for is to be represented within the corporate structure of the company. We're just saying don't hire white men all the time. Like, that's all we're saying. Like, or white, like, give somebody else a shot. You see this in the NFL. You go from the top of the team, it's just white men on down. You could barely get a black head coach now. And they act like it's the hardest thing to do. And I think it's because as you get closer to the top of the company, I think they've insulated themselves with people who look like them. And they think it's a challenge to go out and find folks who are African American or Asian or Latino and talk to them and maybe hire them because they don't do daily life with them. So they have to go hire a chief diversity officer, to do. And
Devin, I was going to say, it comes down to trust. A lot of people in white America don't trust African Americans. They don't trust us to handle certain things. I mean, that's why you don't see certain diversity to hire you up. Like when you're talking about head coaches and CEOs and chairmen and stuff like that. People like that have a certain respect and a certain trust that they've built up within the industry. most of us, people that look like us and even other minorities, they don't get that same sort of level of trust and respect within their industry to where, it actually matters to do something. I didn't mean to cut you off, but what you were saying, I was just thinking about that. I mean, it's just, no, if people trust us more, then maybe they would want to include us, in the picture a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think they don't trust us, and I think some people are afraid that, if they give an opportunity to a minority candidate, they could do better, and then it goes against the myth and the stereotype that those who are African American or Latino are just like less than, and can't do as good a job. So, when you do give them an opportunity and they excel, it kind of goes against that. And well, that means the worth of other folks like white males may not necessarily be as high, because you could say, well, we could hire anybody. You don't have to be a particular race to do a great job as a CEO of a company. And so I just think it's funny, that there's burnout, and it, like you say, it takes death for us to get a year worth of just statements. Like, we just want an acknowledgement of the problem. We're not even starting to fix it yet. We just want an acknowledgement. And it took George Floyd in an 8-minute video during a pandemic just to get us here. And here we are a year later talking about burnout. Like, that is that is how big of a problem this is. Like, the fact that it took all of those things to come together to get us here, and we're already talking about corporate,
just 1 year later.
Just 1 year, we're burnt out. Oh, this is too much money, too much. It just takes too much work for us to focus on diversity. And like you say, also, there may not be a dollar incentive there, because people, I don't know. I mean, maybe folks do care more about what kind of company it is, but I don't think we're to the point where you would see, if they figure out a company has never hired a black CEO or a Latino or something, they're not gonna spend their money with them. And look, hey, this goes back to our conversation about antitrust and monopolies. Sometimes you don't have a choice but to spend your money with a certain company because there are no other alternatives. So there is no incentive for them to change things because they are the only game in town sometimes. So it all kind of connects in a weird way. But it's just, if you understand, America has a problem with acknowledging the problems of black people, and we are a year later and we're talking about corporate burnout as far as diversity. We have a very long way to go in this country as far as in real inclusion and just getting past some of those stereotypes that have been pervasive throughout the years. And so, very good topic. I'm glad we covered it. Just a good conversation. And before we go to break,
that was a great point to end that too, Devin. I just wanted to acknowledge that because I hope viewers really picked up on that. The fact that it's only 1 year.
That's it.
We've gone through the black African Americans have gone through 400 plus years almost of oppression, and after 1 year of getting a little bit of liberties, it's like. We're tired. Y'all slow down. Y'all moving too fast.
Exactly. It's pretty pathetic. But before we go to break, we'll leave you with this a story out of California, which just goes to show a solution on how we can mitigate hate speech and hate crimes. And so, California State Board of Education actually announced yesterday that they have approved a model curriculum of coursework in K through 12 schools to guide how the histories, struggles, and contributions of Black, Asian, Latino, and Native Americans and the racism and marginalization that they experience in the United States will be taught to millions of students. And this is, of course, from the LA Times. And so hopefully that leads to a better culture competency being taught in the schools. And then across the nation, so far, Oregon and Vermont are the only two states that actually require ethnic study classes be taken by their students. And so the bill in California is going to make a high school ethnic studies course a graduation requirement. It's making its way through the legislature, so hopefully this keeps going. And of course, we'll give you an update if it does pass, but much needed and been past time that we got something like that. So we're going to take our very last break, and when we come back, we'll get into our quick hits. So stick with us, and we'll be right back.
Sorry.
All right, welcome back. So as always, we like to end the show with some quick hits, which is, we try to make it funny here with some funny news that you may have heard about or may not have heard about. And so our very first story is coming out of Ohio. And so there was a North Ridgeville resident who phoned authorities after discovering a raccoon was hiding in his dishwasher. And so police sent their resident absurd animal call officer, Patrolman John Metzo, to investigate. I'm mad he actually has a name, Resident Absurd Animal Call Officer. But John Metzo, police officer, got to the house and he found the raccoon actually sleeping in the dishwasher when he arrived. The animal had broken in through a bathroom light and ransacked the kitchen before settling in for a nap under some dirty dishes. Metzo, the officer, is known locally in the city of West Cleveland for responding to other odd calls involving animals, like when a kangaroo got loose from its pen in 2015, and there was a time when a cow fell off a trailer and wandered away in 2019. And so it took the officer about 17 minutes to coax the raccoon out from his bed, his impromptu bed. And so the photos show that the critter crouched inside the dishwasher and then led away. He was led away on a leash by the officer. And so the police department did note during a post that this was, quote, all in a day's work for John, adding that no raccoons were harmed in the making of this Facebook post. So that's kind of scary if it really did break through a bathroom light and go ham in his kitchen. You might want to check your bathroom lights to make sure that there are no holes or anything.
That's what I said, Devin. I was like, man, a bathroom light. I'm like, that's
wow.
like small. Or that's like, geez, you just getting through. That's because I didn't realize they could just shrink their bodies just kind of like rats and just get into those small openings. But you gotta be careful. Another story, viewers, this isn't, a laughing matter. Again, we talk about funny stuff, but this one is really important just because this could be something that could impact your family. But FEMA announced on Wednesday that they're going to start reimbursing funeral expenses for families who lost loved ones during the COVID-19 pandemic. Families will be able to get reimbursements under the new bill that was passed in December and then the one that was passed this year. In February, it looks like AOC and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, they got FEMA to do $2 billion in disaster funds to help with funerals and burial costs. So they're kind of continuing this. So it's really, really great to see that. There are some requirements, though. One, the death must have occurred in the United States or within the U.S. territory or D.C. Death certificate must include the death that was attributed by COVID. The applicants or the person who's applying for the funds must be a U.S. citizen, non-citizen national, or qualified non-citizen who incurred funeral costs after June 20th. And the person who's deceased has to have, there's no requirement for the deceased person to have been a U.S. citizen, non-citizen, or something like that. So it looks like anybody can kind of apply for it. Applications aren't going to open up until April. So give it a couple of weeks. If you've got somebody who's been affected, let them know. If you've been affected, go ahead and, start, looking into it and getting ready to apply in a couple of weeks.
All right. Great job there by FEMA. Really great job there. So our next story here comes out of Michigan. And so for those folks who you're ordering pizza, this is going to make you cringe because this story here involves a DoorDash driver who actually dropped the pizza on the ground, stuffed it back in the box, and delivered it. So Rodney King Jr. Told Fox 2 in Detroit that he and his wife had ordered the pizza one day when neither of them felt like cooking. We've all been there. And then they watched their doorbell camera as the delivery driver arrived. And so King told the news station that, quote, when the guy was walking up to our porch, we saw that he was holding the pizza vertically. That's not right. And then so from there, I knew for a fact that the pizza was outside of the box. And then the pizza actually fell on the ground from the vertical box. And then still, King thought the driver might just own up to what had happened. He was wrong. He told the news station, as soon as I saw the pizza hit the floor, my heart sank a little bit. I was hungry, but I was really hoping he would do the right thing. And so rather than just admitting the mistake, the driver actually shoved the dirty pizza back into the box, placed the pizza box on the porch as if nothing had happened, and then turned around and went back to his car. So instead of enjoying his meal, King had to actually file a complaint with DoorDash, and he said the company refunded his money. And the DoorDash spokesperson actually said that the driver's behavior was, quote, inappropriate and unacceptable. I agree. And then that he had immediately been deactivated when they found out what had happened. So had it not been for technology, we would have never known that this had happened.
I know, David. It's funny because I'm telling you, and everybody can, probably attest to this too. Throughout 2020, DoorDash, I've been hitting them up so often.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, man, what's been going on? I even had somebody in DoorDash. I live in a studio. They left my food outside of the apartment building. Like they didn't even call me or anything. They left the food outside the apartment building and they just hit delivered. And we were just like,
anybody could have grabbed that and just kept rolling. Like,
yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm telling you, so I hope that DoorDash, fixes, instances like that, and, we don't see more of it. Another good story, viewers, obviously there's probably not a whole lot of yard sales going on right now or estate sales, but if there is one in your area, you may want to check out. You may discover something that's worth a lot of money. There was a bowl, a 15th century bowl that was found at a yard sale. And the person, I think, only bought it for probably less than $20-$30. But the bowl was actually auctioned off for a little over $700,000. I mean, it's really, really expensive. I mean, for someone to get this at a yard sale, they called a company called Sotheby's, which is, I guess, a curator of certain, artifacts and different things like that. And they said that this bowl is very rare. It's a small white bowl adorned with cobalt blue paintings and flowers. And it's one of only 7 bowls that ever, that exist in the world. So it's a really, really special variety. And then, like I said, they called this curator and they, did the auction, and it sold for a lot of money. They didn't really figure out how this bowl got to Connecticut, but they said maybe it was passed down from family to family. And I guess the family didn't really know the value. Obviously, they didn't know it, or else they wouldn't have put this at their yard sale. I can only imagine, Devin, after this, story come out, that family's just got to be just wondering, why did we sell that bowl? Like, I mean, I'm sure they sold it for less than $50, and this thing's worth over $700. So, man, this is not a good return on investment for them.
Not at all. I would be sick if I was the person that sold that thing for $50. But moving to our next story here, not quite as exciting as that story, but this is still a great story here.
Oh, Greta's gonna be mad at you, Dad.
Greta, I don't know if Greta has $700,000 on hand, but But Greta Jackson, we're going to talk about Greta Jackson. So she worked as a part-time server at an Outback Steakhouse restaurant for almost 20 years. And she is actually now the owner and managing partner of one of the company's franchises in Roseville, Michigan. And she is the first black woman to own an Outback Steakhouse in the Detroit area. And so Greta Jackson was just 18 years old in her first semester of college when she became a mother. And then at such a young age, she had to provide for her and her daughter, Ashley. And that's when she decided to take the part-time job at a local Outback Steakhouse restaurant in Southfield. And so for the past 2 decades, she's gone through a lot. She's had to make some sacrifices, of course, to make it to where she is now. And so in February of this year, or last month, she finally achieved her goal of ownership. And after sharing the news with her friends and family via Facebook post, she was quickly overwhelmed, of course, with congratulatory messages really from all over the world. She had really gone viral. And so Jackson said she's glad to be an inspiration to black women all over the world, especially her daughter. And she says that if she can own her own restaurant franchise, the possibilities are limitless for her daughter. So really, really great story there coming out of Detroit. We had a few stories come out of Michigan. But that's a really great one there. She put in 18 years, and it really paid off to now be owner and manager of of an Outback Steakhouse franchise. So props to Greta for sticking it out. A really great story there.
Definitely shows you that hard work pays off.
Yes.
You know, don't be ashamed to take a minimum wage job because you can work your way up and be owning the place one day. Our last quick hit to round it off is coming out of my home state now, California. This is interesting, Devin, because I had a season membership for Six Flags until the pandemic. I canceled that, but California is getting ready to prepare to open up their amusement parks and different things like that. But with COVID, they're putting, I guess, some new risk mitigation practices that are going to coalesce around one common event that everybody does. And everybody who's ridden a roller coaster knows, you go down the hill, everybody screams, and that's the first thing you do, you scream. But the California Attraction and Park Association is trying to tell parks to tell their people don't scream. I mean, they're basically just trying to rule out screaming, which I don't even know how they're going to really police that. They're trying to say that obviously we need to make sure that people wear masks. Riders all need to face the same way, which obviously that's how most rides are. And then they're also saying that we can only do 15% capacity. But the whole thing of saying that riders don't need to scream because when you scream, that enhances your risk of passing COVID-19. At that point, I'm just like, just don't even have the theme park open. If you're going to tell people they can't even scream, I'm just like, I mean, and I guess if I'm going to be screaming into my mask, I should have a little bit of peace of mind to know that at least I'm infecting myself if I'm getting the virus. And maybe if I'm going fast enough, all the wind is just, I should just sit on the back or something like that. I don't know. Or no, Devin, if you do ride a roller coaster, make sure you sit in the front. So that way, if someone's coughing and stuff, all their germs aren't going back. So I'll make sure to do that whenever they open up in April. But that just kind of rounds up our quick hits here. As always, we want to make sure to kind of end the episode. And we want to give you some insight into our HBCU awareness series because, man, it's been awesome. I mean, Devin and I, we've talked to some amazing leaders from all around the country. People who are leading these fine institutions, HBCUs within our country, go toe to toe with any institution in America. Please go back, listen to those conversations. I mean, we've had some from FAMU to Grambling to Howard to Tuskegee, Claflin. I mean, all of them. Howard, really good. Hampton, that was one of the recent ones that we had this week, as well as the upcoming ones that we're going to have this week. Clark Atlanta University and their president, Dr. French. We're also going to have Xavier University, Louisiana, and their president, Dr. Barrett. That's going to be on Tuesdays and Thursdays, respectively, at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can join us on Facebook and YouTube. And we also release it on all of our podcasting directories. So if you just like listening to us, you can still listen to these. They're all really, really great interviews. And as you're joining us today for Weekly Roundup, don't forget next Saturday, we're going to be here for Weekly Roundup number 10. I feel like we're halfway through the season, Devin. So it's been nice to kind of get that up there. But, March 27th at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, we'll be here. I know today was a little bit delayed, but Devin's from Mississippi. We've been talking about that. So he had to travel. So we, just gave him a little. Yeah, that's all good, Devin. It's an 8 to 9 hour drive to, go from Mississippi to Texas. So, we can give you an extra, 30 minutes to make that happen. So next week, don't forget to, come back and with us at 7:30, invite some people. Devin, why don't you tell them about the money stuff? Because it's not free. I just got the notification today from Podbean that, dollar amount out of my bank account. So it does cost money to bring you the news.
It does. As much as we love it and as much as we wish it was free, unfortunately, it's not. And that's not the only reason you should donate to us. We're trying to do some great things here. And you won't just be funding us to pay for this, but also to help us partner. There's a lot of various moving pieces to the podcast. And we like to do the live show, but we also like to partner with nonprofits. We're trying to do that. We're trying to get active in the community. And the only way we can do that is if we're supported. We appreciate you listening and watching, but we would absolutely appreciate any kind of dollar support that you would give us. And so you can do that on blackagendapod.com, and that's blackagendapod.com. If you go there, there's a little button that says donate. You can do $1, you can do $100 if you're feeling generous. I know we all just got stimulus checks, so maybe you can spare a few dollars from that and send it to us. But you can give us whatever support we get, we appreciate. The other thing is, like I said, we're trying to partner with some nonprofits. We are now recognizing charities on a monthly basis, and so for March, our charity of the month will be Thurgood Marshall College Fund. And so their mission, if you didn't know, is to ensure student success by promoting educational excellence and preparing the next generation of workforce talent through leadership development. So a really great charity there. If you can, Google Thurgood Marshall College Fund. Go to their website. Maybe support them as you trying to support us. We're just trying to help out, give them some exposure here at the Black Agenda Podcast. So check them out, Thurgood Marshall College Fund. The last thing, if you're watching on Facebook, you're doing it right already. That means you must be following us. But of course, we would appreciate if you share this live stream, but also share some of the posts that we have on our page. We're constantly promoting things. We've been promoting our HBC Awareness Series. You can find us on all the major platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. It's at Black Agenda Pod. And it's at Black Agenda Pod. Like, share, follow us, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on the content that we have. Like Adrian said, we have Xavier University of Louisiana next week, got Clark Atlanta coming up next week, and then the week after that we got Jackson State. So you don't want to miss exactly. So you don't want to miss those interviews because they are very good. So go and subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to music. You can find us, subscribe to us so you don't miss out, and then share everything that you see on social media. So it's 9:30. That means we've been on here for an hour and a half, and so we've taken enough of your time. We appreciate you watching or listening. And again, we'll be back next Saturday at 7:30 on time. And so again, we appreciate you watching and listening, and we'll catch you next time.